Okay, so how do we catch apples? In our apple picking game, we dropped apples. The tree is now dropping apples, and it's going to be up to us to catch apples. And I'm only going to cover one piece of it here. I'm not going to cover the movement of the basket just yet, but I am going to talk about the act of catching apples. All right, a couple things about that. All right, so here we are in our scene. And I press play, and what happens? Well, this thing moves left to right, and it drops apples. And you'll see that it is occasionally colliding with these. Now, all right. Now, important things. We're going to have some things in the environment. And what I want to have happen is I would like it if apples they're going to have some behaviors to them. Apples, they're going to have a little bit more behavior. So apples, when they come into existence, I want them to make a boop sound. I want them to make their presence known, right? And when they collide with a basket, I want them to potentially make a sound. And if one hits the ground, I want them to potentially make a sound. Now, that is that pulls up some interesting questions, right? So, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a noise? That's not the exact question, but it's a similar question. Does the apple make the noise when it's instantiated? I'm going to say yes. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's the tree that makes the noise. If the tree was saying, like throwing it, that would be the tree that makes the noise. Right? So I would say I would have a throw noise on the tree, and I'd have to play it every time I created an apple. It's kind of interesting to do. Why don't I do that? Let's give that a try. It's different. So we're going to say, all right, let's go to Lego tree, and I'm going to put a sound, my bubble sound, which is my boink sound. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the tree and tell the tree that's the one sound it knows how to do, the boop sound. All right. I don't want it to play on awake because that would be inappropriate. Right. So I hit play, nothing happens. I go to my script, my tree behavior script here, and I say, every time we drop an apple, we're going to also do game object get component audio source. Oh, come on. And we're going to call its play function, its play method. Oh, that's interesting. Why is that? IntelliCode suggestion based on this context. Well, that's new. All right. Now, one disadvantage potentially this have, or one thing that's part of the decision-making process, right? The tree can only make one sound at a time. There's only one tree. The tree has one audio source, right? So every time the tree drops an apple, it will reuse that audio source. And that would make sense. If the tree was like making that noise, it could only make that noise once. So that's fine. So this is the effect. We go over here, and you will now hear, hopefully. I'm not sure getting desktop audio. You hearing that? Okay, there's a boinking sound there. And let's see, I'm not quite sure why that's. Let me go over and check my properties over in that. Let's see. Interesting. Maybe I can change that here. Try that maybe. Try one more time. I want you to hear that sound. There we go. Plenty loud. Now you can hear it. All right. Interesting. Learn something new every day. So it's making that sound, and that works just fine. So it's the tree making that sound. Now, if the tree was moving very fast, or it was dropping apples very, very fast, so if the drop interval was set, oh, let's just do it right here. Let's come up here. And let's see what the effect is if the drop interval goes really, really small. Here it does pop a little bit, right? And that's basically because it's trying to play the sound over and over itself there. So it doesn't really have a tail. We will leave that as okay for now. I mean, maybe we could add reverb zone or something. But we'll leave it like that. Now, on the other hand, if we wanted to make sure that the blooping sound didn't have that problem, instead, let's do this. Let's say, okay, the tree doesn't have an audio source on it. Instead, we'll say, every apple makes that sound when it becomes created. So that's a sound that belongs to the apple. So instead, we would actually go to the Apple prefabs, open up the red apple, and say, okay, sounds, bubble, put that directly on the apple that's being created. And in this case, finally, I can do, okay, play on awake is good. So the moment we create that apple, it's going to play it. And I'm going to turn this volume down a little bit. And now in our game, it's very similar. And we'll set this down to be okay. So that worked better. Not as quite as poppy there, which is good. So maybe that's just that. Maybe that's fine. Maybe that's the way to do it. All right. So that's we'll leave that. We'll get rid of the tree's audio source. So we will remove that component and leave that there. So now that drops. Now we want this to catch the apple, right? So we have two things going on. So if this catches the apple, well, we want to destroy the apple if it hits this, right? So how do we destroy the apple if there is a collision? Right? Now we have two options. The question is, does the apple collide with the basket, or does the basket collide with the apple? So I'm going to assume, I'm going to make this assumption for now, so that I'm not going to write another script just yet. I'm going to go ahead and make the decision that the apple is going to hit the basket, right? So what that means is if the apple is being hit by the basket, I should say, that means in my script here, in my Apple behavior script, open that up, there it is, I can have a on collision enter 2D, as a matter of fact, right? So this is going to say, an event happened, and the event is a collision with some other object. Now the collision 2D collision, this collision is the thing you are colliding with. Okay. Let's assume for a moment that the only thing we really care about, that we're only going to collide with, there's nothing else we're going to collide with. So we could very well say destroy game object. Very simple. I collide with anything, I get destroyed. Boom, done. Game, where am I? Game, scenes, come on. Play, nothing. Come on, more apples. Uh-oh. Value, what did I do? Value cannot be null. Come on, where'd we go? Destroy game object. Is that what happened? Lego tree. Tree behavior. Oh, tree behavior. That's no good. I can't destroy the tree. That's a terrible thing to do. Should have put that in there. Okay, it's not the tree that's colliding with anything. It is, of course, the apple that's colliding with something. There we go. Not used to that error, that particular error, but let's assume that's the case. All right. Nope. Value cannot be null. Source, Lego tree. What do we do? Oh, I know what I did. I forgot to remove, in the tree behavior, this audio source there. That. Done. Okay, and that's the reason you should only change one thing at a time. Clear. There we go. All right, ready? Boom, it disappeared. Right, so when an apple hits the basket, it disappears. Right? Wonderful. Wonderful. So, let's do the following. Well, here's the tricky thing. All right, let's get a little tricky here. If I were to want to make a sound when the apple hits the basket, right, I'm going to argue with you. I'm going to argue with myself. I'm going to argue with somebody that the apple should not make the sound hitting the basket. Why? Because the apple hitting the basket, what happens immediately is the basket is destroyed. No, not the basket. The apple. The apple gets destroyed hitting the basket. So if the apple is the one playing the sound, the moment the collision happens, I will not hear the sound because I'm destroying the thing, the game object that has the sound on it the moment I hit the apple, they hit the basket, and therefore it can't happen. Right? You may hear a little bit of it, but it's not going to happen. So think about that. You have to say, okay, things that are remaining in the scene need to be the ones that make the sound. Right? The sound has to be, the sound component, the audio source has to be on a object that is still in the scene. Right? So what I'm going to do for now is I'm going to say, okay, Lego chest, that is going to have the sound that will get played. All right. So in order to do that, I'm going to have some behavior of this Lego chest, which means I should have chest behavior. All right, now I already had chest behavior because I added velocity to it. I had that weird thing where I just added a little bit of velocity to it. All right, save, took off that velocity. And in here, I'm going to have yet another on collision enter 2D. And at this point, we're going to say, okay, the only thing that can collide with this, of course, is going to be an apple. So I don't have to worry about that. Maybe we have to get fancy later. We'll look at for collisions and tags and so on. But we know that is one of the things that can hit with it. And so if it does collide, we want to say game object, get component. This should look familiar. Audio source, play. All right. So I need to make sure that the chest has an audio source to play. And we will do that by looking up our sounds. I happen to have some more sounds in here. Open that up. And we will go to our chest. I have this swish sound. So I'll put this swish sound here on the chest. So now if the chest collides with an apple, if an apple collides with the chest, whoop. Let's see if it moves. It's kind of loud. Play on awake happened. There we go. All right. So every time there's that collision, and I should go out and make that a little bit quieter here. Audio source, we can like tune that. Say, okay, there. And we'll turn off play on awake. Very good. All right. So, using that same lesson, one last thing about catching apples or the apple behavior, right? We have this other instance where what happens is if the apple falls off the bottom of the screen, it squishes, it goes away. It's the environment. It's the act of crossing that line, or perhaps colliding with some other object. If you decided to put another set of colliders at the bottom of the screen, you could do this. But let's just do something simple. We're going to say, okay, there's an imaginary ground here. Just some imaginary ground. And I'm going to put this squish sound. Sounds like this. It's going to be loud. Warn ya. Okay, that's our squish sound. I'm going to go ahead and put that in our scene down here. Somewhere like that. Doesn't really matter where it is. It could be there, dead center. Transform. Oh, 0, 0. Something 0. I like that. And play and awake. Nope, turn that off. Right. So, in order to get that to happen, now let's look. Now this is nice because an apple is going to just get destroyed when it crosses a certain boundary, and that squishing sound should be what happens after the apple is destroyed. Right. So if we go to our Apple script or Apple behavior, excuse me, and for that we have to go to like Apple prefabs, red apple, and we can say here. Now, this is one case where our Apple behavior, we would not want to use a public audio source here, a public thing to refer to up in here, right? Why? Because we're in a prefab. The prefab exists before the scene exists, so it's a little bit tricky to use a public object, something that's set in the Unity editor, when there is no element of that in the scene just yet. So it's best to do this sort of at runtime. And for now, I'm going to do the simple version. So let's see, on collision enter 2D. That's not when it happens. It's here, right? It's in that update. There we go. So when we destroy this apple for that reason, or we could say on destroy all apples. That'd be interesting. But before we destroy the apple, so it's good to just before you destroy it, you want to do game object find, and the name was what? We'll call it ground. And we will say get component. You know this one yet? Audio source. It's guessing me now. Play. Done. All right. So in order to get that to work, we have to make sure that we name that object here. We go back to the scene. And this squish1, I'm going to rename that. Why do I keep ground? Ground. Weird. So it's called ground. There we go. Double check my script. There we go. And now what do you know? Okay. So we've got some differences in sound going on. And let's see, I'm going to do one more tiny thing. It's almost 20 minutes. And we'll figure out, okay. If the apples cross the boundary at the bottom, what's supposed to happen? Apples crossing the bottom. Apple tree prefabs, red apple. Apple behavior. Update. Cross that boundary. I'm calling destroy game object, but maybe, just maybe, I should call destroy all apples. all apples. Why? Well, because that's what's supposed to happen. If an apple hits the ground, I destroy all the apples. Right? There's going to be some other things I need to do. I need to also potentially destroy the baskets. We're not talking about the baskets yet here. Right? We're just doing this. Ready? But you'll notice that one that it created. All right. I practically have kaboom going on here. Practically done. What's missing? Well, I can't move that back and forth yet. Save that for another one.